Apache woman said to the lonely cowboy, "I ain't pretty, sir, but I can cook." Thomas Reed had once believed that a man could build a life with strong hands and a steady heart. He had grown up on a small ranch under a wide, endless sky in the southwest. As a boy, he woke before sunrise to help his father mend fences, feed cattle, and check water lines. The land was dry most of the year, but it had always been enough. Enough grass, enough rain, enough hope. But the year the drought came, enough slowly turned into almost nothing. At first, Thomas did not worry. Droughts had come before. The sky would close for a season, the wind would grow harsh, and the ground would crack. But sooner or later, the clouds would return. That was what his father always said. "This land tests you," his father used to tell him. "It wants to see if you mean what you promise." Thomas had meant every promise he made to that land. But that year, the clouds did not return. The river that ran behind their property thinned until it became a narrow stream. The cattle grew weaker. The grass turned from green to yellow, then from yellow to dust. Thomas and his father worked twice as hard, hauling water from far away, selling what little they could to keep the ranch alive. But hard work cannot create rain. Then, as if the drought was not enough, Thomas's father fell sick. It was not sudden. It was the slow kind of sickness that steals strength day by day. Thomas watched the strongest man he had ever known grow tired and quiet. The man who once lifted heavy sacks without effort now needed help standing up. Thomas tried to carry both burdens, the land and his father, but they were too heavy together. When his father passed, the ranch felt empty in a way that silence cannot explain. Every fence post, every gate, every old tool carried a memory. Thomas walked through the barn one evening and realized he was speaking out loud as if his father might answer. But only the wind answered. Bills began to stack up on the kitchen table. Without rain and without enough cattle, the ranch could not survive. Thomas fought for it as long as he could. He sold equipment. Well, he took small jobs in nearby towns. He borrowed money with promises he hoped to keep. In the end, the land was taken from him. The day he rode away from the ranch was the hardest day of his life. He did not look back at first. He thought if he kept his eyes forward, it would hurt less. But after a few miles, he stopped his horse and turned around. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The barn leaned slightly to one side. The field stretched wide and dry under the pale sky. It had been his whole world. He removed his hat and held it against his chest for a long moment. Then he placed it back on his head and rode away. From that day on, Thomas Reed became a drifting cowboy. He did not think of himself that way at first. He told himself he was only traveling for work. Only until he earned enough to start again. Only until the right chance appeared. But weeks turned into months. He moved from town to town, offering his skills to ranchers who needed extra hands. He fixed fences, trained young horses, helped drive cattle across long distances. He slept in barns, under wagons, and sometimes beneath the open sky, with only his saddle for a pillow. He spoke little, not because he was rude, but because words felt heavy. In small towns, people noticed him. He was tall, with sun-browned skin and steady gray eyes that seemed older than his years. He worked hard and never complained. Ranch owners liked that about him. But when evening came and other workers gathered to laugh or tell stories, Thomas usually stepped away. It was easier not to get close. He had learned something painful. When you build something, you can lose it. When you care for someone, you can lose them too. So he stopped building. He stopped caring too deeply. He did his job, took his pay, and moved on. Some townspeople misunderstood him. They thought he believed he was better than them. Others thought he carried trouble. But those who looked carefully could see the truth. He carried sadness. One late afternoon, after finishing a short job repairing a ranch fence, Thomas headed west toward another small settlement where he had heard there might be work. The sun hung low and orange in the sky. The air was dry, and the wind carried dust across the open land. His only true companion was his horse, a steady brown gelding named Rusty. Rusty had been with him since the ranch days. The horse had survived the drought, the long rides, and the restless nights. Thomas often spoke more to Rusty than to any person. "We'll find something," he muttered that evening, patting the horse's neck. "We always do." The path ahead led near Apache land. Thomas knew enough to be respectful. The region carried history and pride. He had no reason to cause trouble, and he hoped no one would cause trouble for him. As the sky darkened, Rusty suddenly stumbled. Thomas pulled the reins gently and brought the horse to a stop. He slid down to check the animal's hooves. One of the shoes had come loose. Thomas sighed quietly. A loose shoe meant trouble if ignored. The nearest town with a blacksmith was miles away, and night was already settling in. Riding further in the dark would risk injury to the horse. He looked around. In the distance, he noticed faint smoke rising into the evening sky. It came from the edge of a small settlement. The shapes of a few simple homes stood against the fading light. He hesitated. Thomas had learned to rely on himself. Asking for help did not come easily anymore, but he would not risk Rusty's health. The horse had carried him through too much. "It looks like we're staying," he murmured. He led Rusty slowly toward the settlement. As he approached, he felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the feeling of being an outsider. He knew he would be watched. A lone cowboy arriving near nightfall often raised questions. Sure enough, as he drew closer, he saw a few figures in the distance pause in their evening tasks. Conversations grew quieter. Children were gently guided indoors. Thomas kept his hands visible and his movements calm. He did not wish to seem threatening. He simply needed a place to rest and a way to fix a horseshoe. The sky turned deep blue as the first stars appeared. A small fire burned near one of the homes, its warm glow standing out against the cool desert night. And beside that fire stood a woman. She was not dressed in fine clothes, nor did she carry herself with showy pride. She stood still, watching him approach, her expression calm but alert. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing strong features shaped by sun and wind. Thomas stopped several steps away. He removed his hat out of respect. "I mean no harm," he said quietly. "My horse lost a shoe. I was hoping to find a blacksmith in the morning." She studied him, not just his clothes or his horse, but his eyes. It felt as though she was searching for something deeper. Thomas waited. For the first time in many months, he felt something different. Not fear exactly. Not pride either. Just the strange sense that this moment might matter. The wind softened. The fire crackled gently. And though Thomas did not yet know her name, he knew that this small stop, forced by a loose horseshoe and a tired horse, might become more than just another passing night on the road. For a man who had stopped believing in warmth, the simple glow of that fire felt almost unfamiliar, and he did not yet realize that his lonely journey was about to change in a way he never expected. The woman standing by the fire did not rush to speak. She let the silence sit between them for a few seconds, as if weighing something in her mind. The firelight moved gently across her face, showing calm eyes and a steady expression. She was not smiling, but she did not look angry either. She simply looked careful. Thomas stood still, his hat in his hand, waiting. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. "There's a man who fixes shoes for horses," she said. "He will come in the morning." "Thank you, ma'am." She looked at the horse first, not at him. She stepped closer to Rusty, moving slowly so the animal would not feel nervous. Rusty lowered his head slightly, sensing no danger. She bent down to examine the loose shoe. Her hands were strong and steady. "He is tired," she said gently, almost to the horse. "You pushed him far today." Thomas felt a small touch of embarrassment. She was right. He had ridden long hours, hoping to reach the next town before night. He had not meant to strain the animal, but sometimes survival made him forget gentleness. "I'll let him rest," Thomas replied quietly. She stood up and looked at him fully now. For the first time he noticed more details about her. Her hair was tied back simply. Her clothes were plain and practical, meant for work, not for show. There were faint lines around her eyes, not from age alone, but from years spent under open skies. There was strength in her presence, but also something else, something calm and grounded. "You can tie him there," she said, pointing toward a wooden post near the edge of the firelight. "There is water." Thomas hesitated. "I don't wish to cause trouble." "You are not causing trouble," she answered. "You asked with respect." That simple sentence surprised him. He had grown used to suspicion. Respect had become rare in his life, both given and received. He walked Rusty to the post and secured him carefully. The horse drank eagerly from a bucket nearby. The smell of food drifted through the air, warm corn, beans, and something slow-cooked in a pot over the fire. Thomas had eaten little that day. He had grown used to ignoring hunger, but the scent made it harder. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small silver coin. He stepped back toward the fire, but stopped a safe distance away. "Ma'am," he said, holding the coin forward slightly, "could I trouble you for a meal? I can pay." She looked at the coin, then at him. Her gaze did not move quickly. It rested on his face as if searching for truth behind his words. For a brief moment Thomas felt exposed, not judged, but seen. The woman lowered her eyes and gave a quiet breath, almost like a soft laugh at herself. Then she said the words that would stay in Thomas's memory long after that night. "I ain't pretty, sir, but I can cook." Her tone held no shame. It was honest, simple, and strangely brave. Thomas blinked, unsure what she meant at first. Then he understood. Perhaps she had heard comments before. Perhaps strangers had measured her worth by her face instead of her heart. Maybe she had decided to speak before anyone else could. The statement caught him off guard. He had not looked at her with judgment. In truth, he had barely thought about her appearance at all. He had only seen a person standing near a warm fire. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I didn't come here looking for pretty." The words slipped out before he could stop them. He worried they might sound wrong, but she studied him again and seemed to understand what he meant. A small, quiet smile touched the corner of her lips. Not wide, not playful, just real. She motioned toward a flat stone near the fire. "Sit." Thomas sat carefully, placing his hat beside him. The fire's warmth reached his hands first, then his face. He realized how cold the evening had become. She moved with calm skill, stirring the pot, adding a handful of herbs, flipping small rounds of bread on a heated surface. Her movements were steady and practiced. This was not hurried cooking, it was patient. Thomas watched the flames for a while. He had spent many nights near campfires, but this one felt different. It was not just a stop along the road. There was a feeling of stillness here, as if the world beyond the firelight did not matter for a moment. "What is your name?" she asked after some time. "Thomas Reed." "I am Ayanna." He repeated her name quietly, careful to say it correctly. It felt strong and graceful at the same time. She handed him a simple wooden bowl filled with stew and a piece of warm bread. The steam rose gently into the night air. Thomas wrapped his fingers around the bowl and felt warmth sink into his skin. He took the first bite slowly. The food was simple, but it carried something he had not tasted in months. Care. It was seasoned thoughtfully. It was not rushed. It was made to nourish, not just to fill space. He swallowed and gave a small nod. "This is good." Ayanna did not answer right away. She sat across from him, adding more wood to the fire. "Food should be good," she said finally. "It is one of the few things we can offer without fear." Thomas thought about that. He had offered labor, strength, silence. But food was different. It asked nothing in return. He reached again for the coin, but she shook her head gently. "Keep it." "I can pay," he insisted softly. She looked directly at him. "You already paid." "I did?" "You came here with respect," she replied. "Many do not." For a while, they ate in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It felt calm. The fire popped and cracked. In the distance, night insects began their quiet sounds. Rusty shifted softly near the post, now relaxed. After finishing his bowl, Thomas felt something unusual, the desire to stay seated a little longer. Usually he ate quickly and stepped away, ready to move on. But this time he did not rush. Ayanna poured him a small cup of warm drink made from herbs. "It helps with long days," she said. He accepted it with a nod. "You travel alone?" she asked. "Yes." "For long?" "Long enough." She did not press further. She seemed to understand that some answers carry weight. Instead, she spoke about small things. The weather changing soon. The way the stars looked brighter this season. The children in the settlement who ran too fast and laughed too loudly. Her voice softened when she mentioned them. Thomas found himself listening carefully. It had been a long time since someone spoke to him without suspicion or demand. "You are far from your home," she said after a while. He stared into the fire. "I don't have one anymore." The words felt strange, spoken aloud. She did not respond with pity. She simply nodded once, as if acknowledging something important. "Sometimes," she said gently, "the ground beneath us changes. It does not mean we are without roots." Thomas looked up at her. "Feels that way." She studied him again, and for the first time he felt she truly saw the loneliness he carried. A night grew deeper. The fire burned lower. A cool breeze passed through the settlement. Thomas stood slowly. "Thank you for the meal," he said, "and for letting me stay." Ayanna rose as well. "The man who fixes shoes will come at sunrise." He nodded. As he walked toward where he would lay his blanket near Rusty, he paused and looked back at her. She was kneeling near the fire again, adjusting the pot, her face thoughtful in the glow. Her earlier words echoed in his mind. "I ain't pretty, sir, but I can cook." He realized something important then. Beauty was not what stayed with him from that evening. It was her steadiness, her honesty, the way she had spoken without trying to impress. For the first time in many months, Thomas did not feel like he was simply passing through. He lay down beneath the open sky, listening to the quiet sounds around him. The stars stretched wide overhead. The warmth of the meal still rested in his chest. And as sleep slowly found him, he carried a small, unfamiliar feeling. Not hope, exactly. Morning came slowly over the desert land. The sky changed from deep blue to soft orange, and the first light touched the rooftops of the small settlement. Thomas woke before the sun fully rose, as he always did. Years of ranch life had trained his body to rise early, even when he had nowhere special to be. For a few seconds he forgot where he was. Then he saw Rusty tied to the wooden post and remembered the fire, the warm stew, and the quiet woman named Ayanna. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. The air felt cool, and a thin mist hovered close to the ground. He folded his blanket carefully and stood to check on his horse. Rusty looked calmer than he had the night before. Thomas ran his hand along the animal's neck. "Better rest than we've had in a while," he murmured. From across the small open space, he noticed movement near the same fire pit. Ayanna was already awake. She was kneeling beside a flat stone, preparing dough with steady hands. A small pot was heating again. It seemed she welcomed each morning with work instead of delay. Thomas watched quietly for a moment before stepping closer. "Good morning," he said. She looked up, her expression peaceful. "Good morning, Thomas Reed." He was surprised she remembered his full name. He nodded slightly. "You rise early." "There is always something to do," she replied. "The sun does not wait." He almost smiled at that. It sounded like something his father would have said. The man who repaired horseshoes arrived shortly after sunrise. He was older, with careful hands and a quiet manner. He examined Rusty's hoof, removed the loose shoe, and fitted a new one with skill. Thomas stood nearby, watching closely. He always liked to learn, even when he already knew the basics. While the blacksmith worked, Ayanna handed Thomas a cup of warm drink again. This time, he did not offer payment. He simply accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." When the shoe was secured and Rusty stood firm again, Thomas felt a familiar pull inside him. The road was calling. It always did. Staying too long made him uneasy. He had built a habit of leaving before roots could form. He paid the blacksmith fairly and returned to where Ayanna stood. She was feeding a small group of children who had gathered near the fire. They laughed softly as she handed out pieces of warm bread. Thomas noticed how their faces brightened around her. They trusted her. That kind of trust could not be forced. "You are good with them," he said when the children ran off to play. "They need someone who listens," she answered simply. He leaned against a wooden post, unsure why he had not already saddled his horse. Usually, once the problem was solved, he wasted no time, but something kept him still. "You cook for travelers often?" he asked. "Sometimes," she replied. "Sometimes for the settlement, sometimes for no one but myself. That must get lonely." She paused at that word. Lonely. Instead of answering directly, she wiped her hands on a cloth and sat on a low wooden bench. After a moment, she spoke. "Lonely is not always about being alone," she said. "It is about not being understood." Thomas looked out at the land stretching beyond the settlement. "I understand that," he admitted quietly. She studied him again, not with curiosity this time, but with recognition. "Tell me," she said gently, "why does a man who works so hard travel without a home?" The question was not sharp. It was careful. Thomas rarely told his story. Most people did not truly want to hear it. They only asked to fill silence. But Ayanna did not look impatient. She looked ready to listen. He took a slow breath. "There was a ranch," he began. "Small, not rich. But it was ours." He kept his eyes on the horizon as he spoke. The drought came. "Took most of the cattle. Then my father fell sick. I tried to hold it together. Couldn't." He paused, swallowing the weight in his throat. "Lost the land," he finished. Ayanna did not interrupt. She did not offer quick comfort. She simply let his words exist. "That land was your history," she said after a moment. "It was everything," he replied. "And now?" "Now I work. I move. I don't stay long." "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because when you stay," he said slowly, "you start to care. And when you care, you can lose again." The honesty surprised even him. Ayanna looked down at her hands. For a moment, he thought she might end the conversation. But instead, she nodded. "I was promised to someone once," she said quietly. Thomas looked at her, surprised. "He was kind," she continued. "Strong. We were young. There was sickness in the land that year. It took many people. It took him too." Her voice did not shake. It was steady, but there was something deep behind it. After that, people told me to try again, to find someone else quickly. But I could not. Not because I did not want happiness, but because I needed time to understand my own heart. Thomas listened carefully. I cared for my mother until she passed, she went on. Then I stayed. I cook. I help. I live simply. And you never left, he asked. I thought about it, she admitted, but leaving without purpose feels empty. Her words touched something inside him. They sat in silence again, but this silence felt full, not empty. Two people shaped by loss, sitting under the same sky. After a while, Ayanna spoke again. You believe that leaving protects you, she said gently. It does, Thomas answered quickly. She tilted her head slightly. Does it? He did not respond right away. She continued, when you leave before caring, you do not lose others, but you lose the chance to gain. He felt the truth of that, even though part of him resisted it. I don't know how to start again, he admitted. Ayanna reached for a small stick and drew a simple line in the dirt between them. When the land dries, she said, people believe it is dead. But deep beneath, seeds wait. They do not shout. They do not rush. They wait for the right rain. Thomas watched the line in the dirt. Land can dry, she said softly, looking up at him. Hearts don't have to. The sentence settled between them like something sacred. He felt his chest tighten, not from sadness this time, but from something close to hope. It had been so long since anyone spoke to him as if his future still mattered. You speak like someone who has not given up, he said. I speak like someone who knows pain, she corrected gently. Pain does not mean the end. A small breeze moved through the settlement, lifting dust lightly into the air. Children's laughter echoed again in the distance. Thomas realized he had not thought about the road for several minutes. That was unusual. You ever wish things had been different? He asked her. Of course, she said. But wishing does not build a new tomorrow. Choosing does. Choosing what? To remain open, she answered. The simplicity of her reply made him almost smile again. He looked toward Rusty, standing strong with the new shoe. The problem that had brought him here was solved. He could leave now. He should leave. But his boots did not move. Instead, he found himself asking, if a man wanted to stop running, where would he begin? Ayanna stood slowly and brushed the dust from her dress. He would begin, she said, by standing still long enough to see what is already in front of him. There was no pressure in them, no demand, only calm understanding. Thomas felt something shift inside him. Not a loud change, not a dramatic decision, just a small crack in the wall he had built around his heart. For months he had moved like a shadow across the land. No ties, no promises, no roots. But now, in this quiet settlement near Apache land, sitting across from a woman who had faced loss and chosen strength instead of bitterness, he felt something unfamiliar. Not fear of losing, but fear of missing something that could grow. And for the first time since riding away from his father's ranch, Thomas Reed did not feel like a man without roots. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a choice. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, warming the ground and slowly removing the coolness of morning. The settlement became more active as the day moved forward. Women carried water, men prepared tools, and children ran in and out of small homes with endless energy. Life continued in its simple, steady rhythm. Alma stood beside Rusty, one hand resting on the saddle. The horse was ready. The new shoe fit well. There was no reason to stay. And yet he had not mounted. He looked across the open space and saw Ayanna kneeling near the fire again. She was shaping dough carefully, pressing it flat with skilled hands before placing it on the heated stone. A smell of fresh bread drifted gently through the air. She did not look up at him right away. It was as if she already knew he was still there. Thomas tightened the saddle strap, then loosened it again without meaning to. His thoughts felt restless. Leaving had always been simple before. Fix the problem. Thank the people. Right away. But something felt unfinished. He finally walked toward her, boots moving slowly across the dry ground. He cleared his throat softly so he would not startle her. The shoe is fixed, he said. She nodded without stopping her work. Good. I should be moving on. Another small nod. Still no pressure in her face. No question asking him to stay. That almost made it harder. Thomas shifted his weight. Thank you for the food and for listening. Now she looked up. Her eyes were calm, but there was a quiet understanding in them. You are welcome, she replied. The road is long. It is good not to walk it hungry. He gave a faint smile. You speak like you've traveled it. In my own way, she answered. Silence settled between them again, but it was not uncomfortable. The fire crackled softly. A bird called from a nearby tree. Somewhere in the distance, someone laughed. Thomas reached into his pocket again, not for payment this time, but simply to have something to do with his hands. He felt restless, unsure how to say what was pressing on his mind. Ayanna? He began, then stopped. She waited. I've been riding for a long time, he said slowly. Town to town. Ranch to ranch. Never staying. I know, she said gently. I told myself it was easier. And is it? She asked. He looked down at the ground. It's quieter. Quiet is not always peace, she replied. Her words felt true. Thomas took a long breath. When I lost the ranch, I felt like I failed. My father worked his whole life for that land. I couldn't keep it. Ayanna listened without interrupting. Oh, I left, he continued. I thought if I didn't build anything again, I couldn't fail again. And has that worked? She asked softly. He shook his head once. No. The truth felt heavier now that it was spoken clearly. She stood slowly, brushing the flour from her hands. You carry your father with you, she said. Not in land, in what he taught you. Thomas swallowed. He had not thought of it that way. You respect others. You protect what is yours. That did not leave with the ranch. He looked at her carefully. Then why does it feel like something is missing? She stepped a little closer to the fire, her eyes steady. Because you stopped planting. Planting what? He asked. Hope, she said simply. Trust. Roots. He looked at Rusty again, standing patient and strong. The road stretched beyond the settlement, wide and open, leading to familiar loneliness. Staying meant uncertainty. It meant risk. He had avoided risk for so long. Have you ever been afraid to begin again? He asked her. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Many times. What did you do? I began anyway. The simplicity of her answer made him almost laugh, but it was not funny. It was brave. The fire popped again, sending a few small sparks upward. Thomas felt his heartbeat stronger than usual. It was not fear of danger. It was fear of decision. I don't know what staying would look like, he admitted. She tilted her head slightly. It does not need to look like anything yet. He frowned slightly. You speak in riddles. A faint smile touched her face. No, I speak in patience. They stood there for a long moment, the world around them moving as usual, while time seemed slower between them. Finally, Thomas spoke again. Have you ever thought about leaving this place? She considered the question seriously. Yes, she said. Sometimes I look beyond the hills and wonder what is there. And why haven't you gone? She looked toward the rising hills in the distance. I was waiting for a reason. Thomas felt his chest tighten slightly. And if that reason came, then I would decide, she answered. The wind quieted. The world seemed to hold its breath for a second. He realized something important then. She was not asking him to stay. She was not asking him to take her away. She was simply standing in truth, unafraid of it. That kind of strength was rare. Thomas walked back to Rusty and rested his forehead lightly against the horse's neck. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. All right, he whispered to himself. What are you afraid of? The answer came quickly. He was afraid of caring. He was afraid of building something new and watching it fall apart. But another thought followed. He was already tired of running. He turned back toward Ayanna. She was lifting the fresh bread from the stone, placing it carefully into a cloth. She did not look at him yet, but something in her posture suggested she knew he had not left. He walked toward her again, this time with firmer steps. If I didn't leave today, he said quietly, would that cause trouble here? She met his eyes calmly. No. If I stayed a few days, helped with work? There is always work, she replied. And if I asked you... He paused, choosing his words carefully. If I asked you to consider building something beyond this place someday, would that be foolish? Her expression did not change quickly. She studied him, making sure he understood the weight of what he was saying. Are you asking from loneliness? She asked gently. He shook his head slowly. No. Are you asking because you are afraid to be alone? He thought for a moment, then answered honestly. No. Then why? Because when I sit near this fire, he said carefully, I don't feel like a man who lost everything. I feel like a man who might still build something. The honesty in his voice was clear. Ayanna looked at him for a long moment. The wind moved lightly around them. Somewhere in the distance, a child called her name, but she did not answer yet. You are not the only one who sits by this fire and feels something change, she said softly. The words filled the space between them. Thomas felt something settle inside him. Not certainty, but courage. I don't have much, he admitted. No ranch. No big land. Just skills. A strong back, a horse, and a willingness to try again. She stepped closer. Not too close, but enough that he could see the warmth in her eyes clearly. Sometimes, she said, that is more than enough. He let out a slow breath he had not realized he was holding. So, she continued gently, what do you choose? It stretched far and familiar, promising nothing new. Then he looked at the fire. At the settlement. At the woman who had faced her own losses and still chosen openness instead of fear. I choose, he said quietly, to stand still for a while. A small smile appeared on her face. Not wide, not dramatic, but real. Then stand, she replied. And in that simple moment, under a bright desert sky, Thomas Reed made a choice he had been avoiding for months. He did not saddle his horse. He did not ride away at sunrise. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves, stepped closer to the fire, and began, for the first time in a long while, not to run from the future, but to face it. At first, it felt strange to wake up without planning the next town. For months, his mornings had followed the same pattern. Check the horse, pack the blanket, ride toward a place where no one knew his name. But now, when the sun rose over the settlement, he was still there. The first few days passed quietly. He helped repair a broken fence near the edge of the land. He carried water from the well. He fixed a loose hinge on one of the small homes. No one asked many questions. The people watched him carefully at first, but they saw that he worked without complaint and treated everyone with respect. Ayana continued her daily rhythm. She cooked in the mornings and evenings. She helped the children learn small skills, how to shape dough, how to gather herbs, how to listen before speaking. Thomas noticed that she never raised her voice, yet the children listened to her. Sometimes, when their eyes met across the open space, there was a quiet understanding between them.
They did not rush anything. They allowed the days to unfold naturally.
In the evenings, they often sat near the same fire where they had first spoken. The sky would turn soft orange and then deep blue. The desert air cooled gently, and the stars appeared one by one. Thomas found himself speaking more than he had in a long time. He told stories about his father, about how the old man used to sing off-key while repairing fences, about the way he believed every sunrise meant another chance to do better. Ayana listened closely. She asked thoughtful questions. She did not interrupt or try to correct his memories. She simply gave them space. In return, she shared stories of her childhood. She spoke about learning to cook beside her mother, about gathering wood during winter mornings, about the young man she once planned to marry and the dreams they had quietly built together. There was no bitterness in her voice, only honesty. As days turned into weeks, something steady began to grow between them. It was not loud or dramatic. It did not need grand promises. It was built through small actions, shared meals, shared work, shared silence. Thomas realized something important. Staying did not weaken him. It strengthened him. One afternoon, while helping repair an old storage shed, he paused and looked out over the land beyond the settlement. The soil near the riverbank looked darker than the dry ground he remembered from his father's ranch. He walked down to it and knelt, running the dirt through his fingers. It felt alive. An idea formed slowly in his mind. That evening, as he and Ayana sat by the fire, he spoke carefully. There is land near the river, he said. It's not large, but it could hold a small home. Maybe a few animals. You have been thinking. Yes. He poked at the fire with a small stick. I don't want to rebuild what I lost. I want to build something new. Ayana studied his face. And what would that be? A place that is not only mine, he replied. A place where staying is not a risk but a choice. The firelight reflected softly in her eyes. Are you asking me to leave this settlement? She asked gently. I am asking, he said slowly, if you would consider building that place with me. The words felt heavy and important. Ayana did not answer immediately. She looked up at the stars for a long moment. The desert night was quiet except for the soft crackling of wood. Finally she spoke. I have lived here for many years, she said. This place gave me shelter when I needed it, but my heart has not been tied to one piece of ground. Commanded, she turned her gaze back to him. If we build, she continued, it must not be from fear of being alone. It must be from hope. It is, Thomas answered without hesitation. She nodded slowly. Then I will stand beside you. The weeks that followed were filled with steady work. Thomas used his skills to shape wood and strengthen beams. He cut timber carefully and built the frame of a small house near the riverbank. It was not large, but it was solid. Ayanna helped in every way she could. She prepared meals for the long workdays. She gathered smooth stones to line the small path leading to the door. She planted herbs near the side of the house, saying that every home should smell welcoming. The settlement did not resist their decision. In fact, some of the men offered help with lifting heavy beams. The women shared extra tools and advice. It felt less like leaving and more like expanding. Thomas worked with a different kind of energy now. Not the desperate energy of trying to save something already falling apart. This was patient work, careful work. He did not rush. When the roof was finally secured and the small chimney set in place, Thomas stepped back and looked at what they had created. It was modest. It would never be called grand, but it stood strong under the wide sky. The first night they stayed inside, the air felt new. Ayanna lit a small lamp and placed it near the window. The warm light filled the single main room. Thomas stood near the doorway, almost afraid to step fully inside. "You built this," Ayanna said softly. "We built this," he corrected. She smiled. In the following months, they added small touches. A wooden table near the window, shelves for cooking pots, hooks for hanging tools. Ayanna's herbs grew steadily outside. Thomas brought 2 goats and later a few chickens. Life settled into a rhythm. Travelers passing through the area sometimes noticed the small home near the river. Smoke often rose gently from the chimney in the evenings. The scent of warm bread carried on the breeze. Some visitors paused, curious about the couple who lived there. When they saw Ayanna, some looked at her quickly and then away, measuring her by surface appearance. But they did not see what Thomas saw. They did not see the strength in her quiet patience, the courage it took to remain open after loss, the steady kindness she offered without asking for praise. Thomas no longer cared about such shallow judgments. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, a traveler asked him casually, "How did you meet your wife?" Thomas looked across the yard where Ayanna was kneeling, tending to her herbs. "She told me she wasn't pretty," he said with a faint smile. "She forgot to mention she was brave." The traveler laughed lightly, not fully understanding. But Thomas understood. He understood that beauty was not something that faded with age or hardship. It was something built through resilience, through honesty, through the courage to choose hope again. Sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and the stars filled the sky, Thomas would sit outside their home and reflect on the road he once traveled. He remembered the empty barns, the lonely campfires, the silence that followed him from town to town. He did not regret those days. They had shaped him. But he no longer longed for them. Ayanna would sometimes join him, sitting beside him without speaking. Their shoulders would touch lightly, and that simple contact carried more comfort than any words. "You do not run anymore," she said once. "No," he replied, "I don't." "Do you miss it?" "I miss the movement sometimes, but I do not miss the emptiness." She nodded. The river continued to flow steadily nearby. Seasons changed. The dry months came and went, but Thomas no longer feared them the same way. He had learned that loss did not define him. What defined him was the choice to begin again. And it had all started with a simple sentence spoken beside a small fire. "I ain't pretty, sir, but I can cook." Those words had not been about food. They had been about worth, about offering what one has even if the world measures value differently. In the end, Thomas learned that real beauty is not found in perfect features or grand appearances. It is found in the person who stays, the person who builds with you, the person who looks at your broken past and still sees a future, and in their small home by the river, built from second chances and steady courage, warmth lived again, not only in the fire that burned each night, but in 2 hearts that chose not to dry out, even after the hardest seasons.